Ireland is a small country. You can pretty much drive from one end to the other in less than a day, way less, like 7 or 8 hours. But this island off the west coast of Europe is packed with some of the most beautiful and rugged landscapes in the world. Our little island has 275 mountains, according to the Vandeleur-Lynams scale. And that classifies a mountain that is over 600 metres in elevation and has 15 metres of prominence. While bagging these peaks is not as widely spoken about as, say, the Munroes in Scotland or the Wainwrights in the Lake District or the 14ers in the US, there are a small number of people who have managed to scale all 275. My guest this week, Ellie Berry, not only ticked off all 275 peaks, but managed to do it in a new record time of 50 days and 5 hours, beating the previous record by almost 5 days. You might remember Ellie as one part of Tough Souls. I did a podcast with her and her partner Carl way back when they completed the challenge of hiking all of the Irish Waymarked trails. This time, she conquered a new challenge. And if it wasn't already a huge challenge, Ireland had one of the worst summers for rainfall on record this year. Adding to the mix a couple of spills and a missed peak, this was truly an achievement of mind over matter. While Ellie is soft-spoken, her achievements are almost deafening. So, without any further ado, this is the Hiker Podcast. I am Owen Hamilton, and please enjoy my conversation with Ellie Berry. But anyway, so we have a lot to talk about because it's the last time you were on the podcast, you were part of, or I suppose but two parts of Tough Souls were joining us on the podcast talking about everything hiking in Ireland. But it hasn't just been hiking in Ireland that you've been doing. You've been doing quite a lot of running, a lot of trail running, a lot of mountain summiting. But this year, you've just topped it all off with an incredible feat of top. I don't want to get this wrong, so I'm gonna hand it over to you to get it right. But essentially, you've climbed all of Ireland's highest peaks in a record time.
Well, you got it pretty spot on.
Okay.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm going with. So the list is known as the Vandeleur-Lynams.
That's what I was going to get wrong.
Yeah. And basically, it is every quote unquote mountain in Ireland. Now, everywhere you go has a different definition of what a mountain is. Do we need to actually have definitions for such things? Who knows? But
there's a movie about that.
Is there?
When a hill became a mountain, starring what's your man's name from Notting Hill and
Hugh Grant.
Hugh Grant, yeah, and it's just about a hill that became a mountain in Wales.
They carried loads of rocks on the top of it to make it qualify. Yes, yeah.
You know what's going to happen now? Someone else is going to come and try and beat your record, and then they're going to bring a load of rocks up to the top of a hill and make it a mountain. You're like, well, there's a new mountain.
Well, actually, so in between the previous record was set by James Forrest.
Yeah.
And when he did it, there was actually 273 mountains. And when I did it just there were 275.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it also gained 2 mountains. And the thing is that, the definition is 600 meters tall or more with a minimum of 15 meters of prominence. So peaky pointiness. But there are so many kind of random little hills or kind of lumps between other mountains that until you go out and measure them really, 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 really accurately, you mightn't know that it was actually pointy enough to be called a mountain. So my favorite example, or possibly my least favorite, it's the best example. It wasn't my favorite mountain to climb. Is Lough Curragh Mound in the Galtee Mountains.
Oh yeah.
So the Galtees are a pretty straightforward range in that most of them are kind of along one line. There's a couple of offshoots, but when you're up kind of on Galtee Moor, Galtee Beag, and you look down, there's a Lough Curragh Lake. It's one of the lakes that you can see up there. And beside Lough Curragh, there is a mound. It's not a mountain, but it is 600.01 meters tall and it is just about high enough up from the lake to be considered its own peak. Like, would I classify this as a mountain if I was sending somebody to the Galties? No. But that was one of the 2 new ones that were added since James did the list. So to be honest, like if that had been on the list when James did it, it wouldn't have made much of a difference to him. So,
and it's a little bit of a I suppose you out for long days anyway, so it's not really too much of a bother. But I've been there before. I was there last summer. Did the Galtee and Cush loop, the horseshoe loop. But we went up to Lough Curragh. We actually planned to kind of camp up at Lough Curragh.
Yeah.
At that mount.
Oh, so you accidentally
I know
got
it
that
very,
peak as
very
well.
well. I know it very well. Like when you said Lough Curragh Mount, I was like, surely she doesn't mean that little lump of like, soil that's there. But yeah, there is actually like if you think about the trail that brings you up to it, it's a bit of a steep trail at points. So it does make sense.
I guess the Galties themselves just kind of start enough above sea level that even though it doesn't feel like a huge climb, it still is. Yeah.
That's incredible. And what was the other? Do you know what the second?
No, actually,
mountain. No,
I don't know what it was.
Maybe you can call James and just compare notes.
Yeah. All 274 other peaks.
That's an incredible. And what was the time and what was the kind of the shavings that you've done?
So James Forrest did it in 56 days. Which is an incredible time. And I did it so I'm taking the time from my first peak to my 275th peak. So when I got from the first summit to my very last was 50 days, 5 hours and 45 minutes.
50 days, 5 hours and 45 minutes.
Yes.
So just my calculations here is that you had an average of 5.6 mountains every single day.
Yes, and I'm quite happy. Like when we set off, I was aiming for an average of 7 a day, but that was if absolutely nothing had gone wrong, with the minimum of getting 5 mountains a day. So as you can see, wow. I got just in that window of what the goal was when we set off. So yeah.
Hey, I hope you don't mind me interrupting the conversation. If you tuned in last week, you might have heard about our open weekend where we gave everyone free access to Pro Plus. If you got a chance to check it out, you might be interested to know that we have a sale on now that will save you 20% off your first year on Hiker Pro Plus. Simply open up the app and you'll see the offer when you sign in. Fun fact, Ellie actually used Hiker Pro Plus while planning her routes and navigating the 275 mountains of Ireland. Okay, let's get back to the interview. So, okay, let's go right back. When did the idea come to mind to take on something like this?
So I think this has been the longest gestation period from an idea of a project to doing a project that I've ever had. Because I think a friend had been talking to Carl about the idea sometime after James Forrest had done it. But that never really turned into anything. And then we moved out west and we were renovating this house. And Carl said to me one day, you're really getting into this kind of like trail running or just like moving faster in the outdoors space. You should try and do the mountains project. Because that's what it was, just the mountains. And I was like, maybe I'll do it next year. And then suddenly kind of the end of the year was looming. And it was like, if I'm going to do this next year, I need to be training now. So I'd say I took it seriously from maybe a year ago, maybe a little bit more than that. So it had probably 6 or 8 months of lead up of like, okay, we need to start researching, we need to start buying maps, we need to start like I made sure I'd done my mountain skills 2 beforehand, even though I was confident on the mountains anyway. I just wanted to have like everything in the back pocket that I could. But then it kind of went through this phase of like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then you kind of get to about 3 or 4 months out and you're like, oh, this is big. Am I actually going to do this? And we had to even delay starting by a month of the original plan, just with getting everything organized to actually leave for up to like 60 days. And so then it started June, we drove to Galway. And we started in the 12 bends.
And did you like you average 5.5 mountains per day, but like there's kind of known routes like the Glencone Horseshoe, the Glen Corbett on the far side as well. Like then there's the combination of all of those. Did you do that, or what was your approach to like your route planning?
So the route planning, I really have to give Carl so much credit. So for my very first day, I did the Glencone Horseshoe. Because we had done it several times before. So it was like a known entity. It was like, okay, well, ease myself into it, do something I've done before. And I think that got 7 peaks.
I thought you said the Glencone. I was like, ease yourself into it. Like, that's a hard day. Glencone is it? So if anyone like is not from Ireland, there's like these 2 opposing horseshoe loops like right beside each other. Do not get them mixed up. Glen Corbett is the quote unquote, as Ellie puts it, the easy one.
Yeah, no, easy is the wrong phrase. It's purely actually just that it was a known entity.
Route planning, yeah, fair
and
enough.
Route planning, yeah. And it's like having a loop like that would get me 7 peaks where I wasn't retracing too many steps was really nice. Yeah. So the whole thing was the whole route planning aspect was taking multiple different sources. So we'd look at mountainviews.ie to learn about different like access points or like what were the agreed upon ways up mountains or what areas we should avoid if we were kind of crossing between mountain ranges. Like this really was Carl's domain, because while I'd be on the mountains, he would be building my GPX files for the following days. So he built himself his own little system of, he combined the Strava heat map with the elevation of routes. So it would be kind of automatically plotting between either the Strava heat map or just how steep the route was. And then, like knowing about like the Irish Peaks book from MI, just looking at literally any sources, looking at Hiker, looking at everything and anything to see what kind of routes people did anyway, because sometimes a route that pre-exists might be a couple of kilometers longer, but if it's already there, it's a lot easier going underfoot than being like, okay, and when you get 7k along it, you then have to take a sharp right and you're going to save 2k, but you're like falling through the bog for that whole 2k, so you're not actually saving any energy. And
that must be so tough, I suppose, from Carl's perspective. Like I know Carl is a fairly established hiker himself and hill walker, and he's probably done most of the mountains himself already over the years. But to route plan something so extensive without being there, without actually being able to be up there and kind of go, okay, I planned this and I'm going to change the route. He's giving something to you and you're just kind of like, okay, let's go.
It was a huge collaboration. So before we set off, we had the first 50 mountains. We had those routes done. Or Carl had them done, and I had gone through them with him and being like, okay, yeah, this makes sense, whatever. But then I guess it is also just the fact that we've been in the mountains together for 6 years, and we can kind of we both know each other's ticks, so we know okay, well, Carl's probably going to do it this way and I'm probably going to do it that way or whatever. And he also, I feel like going into it, he had a much higher belief in me than I did. So he knew that I would be fine up there, which is nice. And it wasn't always perfect. Like there were a couple of routes where he'd say, okay, well, we know that there is going to be something to follow until about 1,500 meters from the road down. And online, I can find nothing about where you can join this road. But at that point, you're going to be high up enough. You're going to be able to see the road. I'm going to park here. Like, we'll cross that last 1,500 meters when you come to it. So yeah, it's about, I feel like with every big project, it's about planning as well as you can, but also knowing that the plans are going to be so flexible and they're going to change so much while you're doing it. But it's in that planning and in that research that you get comfortable with the ideas of kind of everything. And if something goes wrong, it's like, well, something's always going to go wrong. But I remember that there was, I don't know, whatever, like there was a farm access point up to here, and while nobody mentioned if the farmer was happy or not for hikers to be using that route, or walkers or runners, if I get stuck in a storm, I'm sure I can come down that way if I need to, that kind of stuff. So yeah, Carl definitely had the harder job of the two of us for between all the route planning and being my chauffeur and head cook and yeah.
Well, I would maybe even argue back that he probably had he's a map nerd, and I know he's an absolute map nerd, and he probably loved every second of doing it as well. While it can be stressful, he's just like, I get to look up maps.
Yeah.
But it does just immensely immensely complicated, and it's like, to do it for one day is one thing, but to plan out, routes, taking into consideration the days and weeks and months that you have already done, like having to kind of go, okay, you've got 50 days in your legs right now. Like, what is the quickest? What is the safest? What is the most logical way of getting up this mountain? So it kind of, like, while it gets, I suppose it probably just gets easier as you go to kind of go, okay, we've like experienced all these different mistakes. We've had to like change plans like 10, 15 times over. But at the same time, there's other complications that come into the fold as you go along as well.
Yeah. And I guess, so when you actually look at the map of Ireland and you look at where the mountains are, the 600 plus meter peaks, they basically do a whole ring around the island, skipping over Limerick and Clare. So the logical start point was either to start in Galway and go around clockwise, or start in Kerry and go anti-clockwise. And the kind of the factors that you were kind of talking about there to look at was, if where do I start first? Because in many ways, I'm going to be freshest at the start. I am going to have more experience by the end. Which do I want to have for which side? And I decided to start in Galway and go around clockwise and finish in Kerry. I decided that it would be more beneficial for me to have the mental fortitude of being like, well, I've climbed every other mountain on the island. I can get up whatever Kerry wants to throw at me, which, spoiler, like just about. Kerry had its challenges, and I'm also glad I did it that way, not just for the kind of mental confidence, but I definitely gained fitness along the way as well. I managed to kind of thread that very thin line of, you have to push yourself every day to actually be making progress, but you don't want to push yourself over the edge so that you're then too tired, and that each day you're actually kind of going downhill until you crash. And that was one of the hardest parts of the project, because there was once or twice where I was like, oh, like maybe I'm not going hard enough. And then there was once or twice where I was like, I am dead. I just want to sleep. I do not want to get out of the car again. So I think I just managed to find that line for the whole time, which was, also tricky.
You speak like a true ultra runner. You're constantly on the edge. You're constantly just like, am I? Yeah, no, just like oh, like, could I just push myself a little bit further? But like, yeah, it's just an incredible like thing to comprehend. You know, like not just the logistics of like getting around and planning all these different routes, but then also like driving from one stop to the next, and like how fast is that drive going to be? Where are we going to stay? You know, sorry, accommodation. Like, did you mostly stay in the car, or did you?
Oh, it was a bit of everything. Okay. So stayed with friends and family. We camped. We had 10 days in my friend's van, which was amazing. Thank you, Kieran.
Yeah.
And then, so when we started in Galway, stayed in my dad's house, and that was our base for the start of Galway. And then for kind of Mayo, Donegal, we had Kieran's van. Camped our whole way through the north, made it down to Dublin Wicklow. Having lived in Dublin for 10 years, I knew enough people there to, and Kieran again, put us up. Then down towards Tipperary, stay with my mum, stay with more family. And then we head down to Cork and Kerry, and we were camping in campsites. But it feels very cliche. One of the biggest battles for this whole project was the weather.
Yeah.
And Ireland and its weather. And so I did this project across June and July, and July was the wettest month, like July on record in history. Yeah. And some places, it wasn't just that it was 120%. Some places had 380% more rain. I was swimming these mountains on occasion. And so when we were in Cork and Kerry, we stayed in a campsite for the whole Bear Peninsula, and then we were heading up to the Dingle Peninsula, and I was just so tired because we were lying there in the tent, just feeling the wind and the rain battering it all night. I wasn't actually recovering, and that was when Carl made the call to book us into some private rooms in hostels. And it's strange because there was a moment where I felt like I was like not being hardcore enough or something.
I think we had the same conversation last time when we were talking about hiking, like what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. Yeah.
And I tried to say that to Carl, and he kind of looked at me like in absolute confusion, being like, the goal isn't to camp across Ireland, it's to climb every mountain.
Yeah.
Where you sleep is not integral to that. Then we stayed. So basically in each county or each area, we had a base that we went from, whether it was a family's house, a friend's house, a hostel. Yeah, that was how we kind of made it around. So
there was the highs and the lows, quite literally, and like the Irish weather, obviously, as you said, like takes its toll. I do remember, like when I was doing my training as well for Kerry, like I was like, oh, I'll train through summer. It's going to be great. Nope. Yeah. Like the wind is probably even the hardest part, especially when you're going up mountains. Like it's just unbearable around Ireland. But what were some of the highlights? What were some of the great moments, apart from finishing the whole thing?
Apart from finishing, yeah. Oh, so one of my maybe on about day 6, day 8, around then I was in Mayo at that point, and I was going up Ben Gorm. And it was my first double day where I did one section of mountains in the morning, and then we drove and I did a separate section in the evening. And we were heading up, and it was, I don't know, 8 or 9 p.m, but obviously still bright in Ireland. But they had the most beautiful pink glow, and it wasn't quite a cloud inversion, but I was looking over at Muilree, and the clouds are just kind of climbing over the sides of it and filling the basin in front of it. And that was just like, I will never forget that mental image. That was just incredible. That's burnt itself into my mind, and I hope it never leaves. And did a lot of sea swims as my cold water therapy for the legs. So a day or two after that view that I mentioned, I went up I went up Muiri from Silver Strand from the beach. Yeah, Silver Strand. From the quote unquote easy side, because I was getting all of the peaks along that ridge. But the mountain that day was completely in clouds. The cloud level never rose above about 400 meters, but the going down and swimming on the beach that day was just beautiful afterwards. So a lot of good memories are also where I finished a section of mountains and came down and jumped straight in the sea. Another one is Slieve Moor on Achill Island. That's another one, which that mountain is a phrase we kind of came up with on the project was it was a mountain with no filler. So no filler. So only the best bits. You get straight into the climb. The climb is steep but short. Like the views are amazing. You're kind of the way that I went up. It's somewhat of it's not a ridge is an overstatement, but you're kind of walking up the side of the mountain beside where it kind of has a little bowl with the lake in it.
Like a shoulder.
Yeah, thank you.
Number 2, come back.
A steep shoulder. Get to the summit, have a dance on the summit, come down, jump into the sea. That was a beautiful end to Achill Island. Yeah,
it sounds like, you know, I had Ian O'Brien who did European or European. So he's beyond the podcast. Is coming out next week, or sorry, coming out tomorrow.
Cool.
So he took on the challenge of climbing all the EU 27 highest peaks, or the highest points in all these EU states, plus the highest peak in the UK in Ben Nevis, and to do it in 28 days. It was like, the story was absolutely incredible. I remember like following the whole journey. It is just like immensely incredible. And he kind of did similar, like he has to have logistics of like how he's going to get from one to the other and everything. And you know, some of the peaks are like, you know, in the Netherlands where like it's a staircase, you know, there's no mountains. But I asked him the same question, like, what were some of the highlights? And he said, like, some of the highlights weren't even being on mountains. Like, some of them were incredible. Like those moments of, like, as you said, like you see the sun, you know, rising or setting, and you got cloud inversions, and you're either on your own or like you're with your friends or you're with Carl. But he said the best memories were actually in the van, you know, just driving around. Because when you take on a project like this, and like that's what I'm, you know, I've mentioned to you off air, and you got your thing as well. That's what you do it for.
Mm-hmm.
You do it for getting people involved, like you know, having you're all working together for this project. I would love to like support somebody else when they're doing something big or crazy, you know. But like when it's you, you have the grueling task of actually completing the thing, but you get to come back down and you get to go, right, cool, what are we doing tonight? You know, we going to the sea, you know, what are we doing? Are we eating tea cake?
yeah, exactly. Like when you're on these kind of adventures, you get to the end of a day and it feels like a week, and you get to the end of a week and it feels like a month, because it's just full of all of those kind of moments. It's like your time is so full and so rich. It's funny you say that. Like when we was down at Kerry for the Kerry Way, that's exactly how it felt. You know, when we got to the end of the whole trip, we were there for 4 days and it felt like we were there for an entire month. It's just because every single moment you're out, you're doing something, you're getting ready for the race, you're running the race, you're, you know, driving from here to here, and it just like you have all these memories, and it's like staying active just makes you feel more alive, you know. 100%.
Nothing more cliche than that. So did you eat much tea cake when you're on the mountains?
No. We've evolved.
Okay. What's the secret sauce now?
It was a lot of cocoa noodles.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was making my own. Like I didn't use the sachets that came with it, so
Yeah.
I pre-mixed my own. It's a combination of different dried seaweeds, chili flakes, pine nuts, sesame seeds, concoction. Garlic. So I pre-made my own seasoning, and so it was a lot of that with onion and scallions and chickpeas, and yes, a lot of that. Um, More porridge than I would have liked, but there's a reason you eat it. A lot of protein shakes. That was probably
Yeah.
Carl's hardest job. I'd get off the mountain and he would be there holding the protein shake. And
Yeah.
obviously, because we're living out of a car, it's just protein powder and water in a shaker. Was possibly one of the hardest parts of the project, was getting that protein shake into me. But yeah, and then a lot of carbs. Chipper chips were like little bags of sunshine when you're tired. Yeah, yeah, a lot of bags of crisps because of like the salts as well. Like I was when I was on the mountain, I was drinking a lot of Tailwind, and I wasn't using gels. I was using whatever energy bars, different supermarkets had on sale. So all the different kind of Trek bars, Naked bars, all those. And then I would have Summit jellies. Obviously, you have to celebrate when you get to a summit. So they were typically Aldi does a vegan little cherry.
You know them well.
Yes.
You know them a little too well.
Well, I knew them so personally for those weeks. I had to have some Summit jellies. That was pretty much my quote unquote balanced diet for those 2 months.
And so, okay, like training for something like this, like how do you train for something like this? Like you obviously, as you mentioned earlier, you gain fitness throughout the entire thing, and every day is training for the next day.
Yes.
But there is a certain amount of endurance that you need to get ready for, because like, even in those first like 5 days, 7 days, your body's just going to be in a state of shock, because it's like, hang on a second, you were just up here yesterday. What are you doing?
Yeah.
So how did you prepare for that?
So I have a coach who's Andrew of Fitness Goose Run Club, and he put together amazing training plans for me. And I will admit, I did a terrible job of following all of them. But
that's what it's for.
Yeah, exactly. It's for the guilt of looking at the thing, being like, I've missed 2 runs this week. So while I knew I wasn't going to be running my way across the mountains, it was going to be a case of moving in whatever way was fastest for me for the different areas. I still focused on running as my training because it is a more intense cardio. So if I was to try and do enough walking or kind of hiking in a week, just getting that volume wasn't going to be possible. Yeah. So it was a lot of running, a lot of going to my local hills and doing laps of the steepest bits. Knocknarea, the people who live around Knocknarea must have been absolutely sick of me come April and May. And so it wasn't, the training wasn't crazy. Now, maybe if I'd actually done it all, it would have been a little crazier. But like everything, it was about the consistency. So even when I would miss some, it was like, okay, well, I just need to really nail it for the next while. And I've also done enough of these kind of projects at this point where I know that if I can get through those, that the first 7 days are going to be brutal, but then the body is just going to start to adapt. So for me, when I started, it was like, okay, we'll just get 7 days. Just get 7 days in. Don't think about, you don't know how many days it's going to take. Just get past the first 7, which worked really well for me. For most of the project, I wasn't thinking about the 100, the 200 mountains I have ahead of me. It was like, okay, well, I'm just going to finish Galway and Mayo, because Galway and Mayo have 50 peaks. So I'm just going to get that block done. And that's like, oh, and now I'm just going to do the north. And now I'm just going to get through Wicklow. If I kind of looked at the looming 100 mountains I have ahead of me, it was like, okay, well, I'm just going to finish Galway and Mayo, because Galway and Mayo have 50 peaks. So I'm just going to get that block done. And now I'm just going to get through Wicklow. Yeah, if I kind of looked at the looming overarching size of the whole thing, your brain's just too tired to want to comprehend that. So taking it in those kind of bite-sized chunks really, really helped.
Was there ever a moment, you probably know the answer to this already, was there a moment where you were like, just going to drop it now? Did you ever want to pack it in?
So the first, it wasn't a packing it in moment, but the first really low moment was in the morns. So the day before, I had rolled my ankle. Not so bad that I couldn't move, but bad enough that I had it taped up, and I only had 2 peaks left in the morns. And I was like, okay, tomorrow I get those 2 peaks. We drive down to Wicklow. That's all I do tomorrow. Be nice and chill. So the 2 peaks that I had left, I think, were the most westerly peaks in the morns. I can't remember the names of them, but they were basically never done because they're not on the Mourne wall. So the route up itself was both very, very steep and very overgrown and very boggy. And so I really, really slowly, because I was like, I'm not doing any more damage, I really, really slowly hiked up, got to the first peak. The wall, like there was still a wall there, even though it wasn't the wall. Followed the wall over to the second peak, got that, came back down, and we drove, 20 minutes to the closest petrol station. Put on my dry clothes, was eating a bag of crisps, and I zoom in on my Strava, and I had missed the first peak. So when
remember when you posted this.
So when I got to that first, what I thought was the first summit, the wall had a corner and it had a cairn. It had a big pile of stones, and I was like, "This is obviously the summit." Didn't check anything. The actual summit was 100 meters away on the other side of the wall. So we drove back, and I put back on all my wet gear, all my wet gear, and went up again. And I cried while putting on the wet gear. I cried while I started the climb. And it was like, if I'm going to cry, I might as well be moving while I'm doing it. Got to be efficient. So I got to the correct peak, and I stood there, and I was like, well, I'm going to zoom in on my watch. This is definitely it. Okay. And that, in many ways, that was day 22. And I'm glad I made that mistake as early on as that. I hadn't yet, don't think I'd yet hit 100 peaks at that point. Okay. So it was relatively early on to kind of make that mistake. And I was hyper vigilant after that. So that was kind of the first low day. And then it probably wasn't until I was so the county of Kerry itself, or if you take the ones kind of on the border between Cork and Kerry as well, there's about 100 peaks just down there out of the 275. Wow. Yeah, I think if you take just the county of Kerry, it might be about 91, but there are some on the border. So 100 just down there. And that was quite daunting. And so I did the Beara Peninsula first. I absolutely love Beara so much. And then we moved up to the Dingle Peninsula, and it was really starting to hit me. I was getting really tired, and I was like, okay, it doesn't matter. I'm going to have a big day. I'm going to push through. And I was just in the clouds, couldn't see anything. And I looked down at one point, and it's like, your last kilometer took you 22 minutes. And I had been like, it was bog. There wasn't any trail, but I had been pushing. And I was like, how did it take me 22 minutes to do 1 kilometer? And that just...
It killed you.
Yeah. And so I cried my way across the next several peaks. It's funny, in other projects, when things have kind of frustrated me or overwhelmed me, I would kind of, give myself a little bit of a talking to, and I like resorting to tears has never really been, I don't know how I dealt with things, but I guess you also just get such a sense of relief afterwards, after a good cry, that
that's that exhaustion cry though. Your body is just like, it's just like so tired that it's just like, well, I'm just going to let all the tear ducts go, and like your emotions flow out.
They just flow out, and I'm like, okay, well that's done now, so I guess I keep going. That particular day, yeah, I was quite low, and Carl actually like hiked up from the other end, without me knowing, to meet me on the last like mountain or so. And then I saw him, and I, yeah, the exhaustion tears came again, and I was like, you're here. Yeah, so those are probably the lowest moments. And out of 50 days, I'm really happy that there were only about two, maybe three or so that were particularly low.
Yeah, like that I do remember when you posted about the having to redo that peak.
Yeah.
And that just like, it killed me inside, because I was like, you've just killed yourself all day, and for the last 3 weeks doing all these different peaks, and you just finished for the day. You're just like, okay, mentally I'm done, and then you have to go back and do it again, and like that kind of like walk of shame of putting your clothes back on as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to ask about that peak. What was it, like higher elevation, or was it just the actual pinpoint peak was like 100 meters away, 150 meters away?
Oh yeah, to the eye, it did not look higher.
Okay.
Just the actual marked, and so I had all 275 peaks set on my watch as waypoints, so I could zoom in and get to exactly. And there were several mountains where I would look at the pin on my watch, and I'd stand there and be like, well, this doesn't actually feel like the peak. I'm like, well, there's a fancy looking rock over there. I'll go stand by that rock, and then I'd stand by that rock, and I'm like, actually, that little lump over there looks higher. I guess I'll go stand there for a minute. If anyone could see me just kind of wandering around, because there isn't going to be a cairn on all 275. So there was multiple days where I was just like, I'll just kind of wander around here for a bit, and at some point, I'm going to be on what is quote unquote like the highest point. Yeah, definitely had several of those.
So the last peak, so when the recording of this, I assume, was peak to peak. So it was like from the time you hit the first peak to the time you hit the last peak. That was the recording of it. Yeah. So what when you hit that last, what was the last peak?
Oh, it was in the Mangertons. What was its name? I should know that. Let me click on it.
Oh, the first one.
My first peak was Derry Clare.
Oh, Derry Clare. Okay.
Yeah. I came up through the forestry, kind of on the outside of the horseshoe up to Derry Clare. Yeah, and went around that way. And then my last peak was Knockbrack.
Okay.
In the Mangertons.
And that was the one that Carl came up and met you at the top.
No. Actually, he didn't come up to. No, so it was on Dingle where he had to come up. And meet
sorry. Okay.
So for the final peak, it would have been lovely if the weather was nice and it had been anyway accessible, but it was not. The Mangertons, there are a couple of nice trails around some of them. To link all 7 of them that I wanted, it was a lot of bog. And so I got to Knockbrack. I FaceTimed Carl to be like, yay, in the like sideways rain that was just attacking me. And he was like, okay, great. You look a bit blue. Let's get down. And, or like, you look like frozen. Not sad, just frozen. Let's get off the mountain now. And and get you some food
and some warm clothes. Yeah. And like, what was say like some of the longer times on the mountain, like your kind of average time, like out on the day? I know you had your double days.
Yes.
Which would be like the longer one, separating into 2 sections. Was there any like big long stretches where you're out for?
So I guess it depends. So my longest or my biggest quote unquote double day was actually 5 separate sections. So it was coming from the Wicklow Mountains down to kind of the Tipperary, Munroes area. There was 7 different peaks along that way that include like Mount Leinster and Blackstairs and whatever that were all separate. So that was my longest literal day from the time I started to the time I got to like finish. So I think across those, it was 5 outings, 7 peaks. Not quite 40k, 37 or so k.
Wow.
My longest individual day peaks wise was I got all 19 of the McGillicuddy Reeks in one day.
Oh yeah, there's a big. So
Yeah.
there is a loop. There is a massive loop that you can do there. That's not the lock?
No. So what I did, I started at up Hydro Road. So there is a loop that you can do there that you can take in Carrantoul and come down Cahir West. So I started at Hydro Road, went up that over to Cahir West on the loop, and then back over to Carrantoul. And then I went via Big Gun and Knocknapeishta. So it's quite a ridge scramble, very technical crossing through that bit, and then basically down into the Gap of Dunlow at the very, very far end, which was a really cool day, actually. I really enjoyed it. I just about got the wet, like that was one of the few days in Kerry where I had good weather. That was why I did it that day. We had each section or each mountain range broken up into different routes, obviously. And when people ask, oh, so what day exactly are you going to do Carrantoul? It's like, well, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to look at the window and the sun is going to be shining. And it's like, okay, today we're doing the Reeks or whatever. That was how we were able to do that way, basically, because the weather was just so bad. You had to just seize the day. Yeah.
And it's so changeable down there as well. Like you can,
so changeable.
The weather report could be saying that it's going to be sunshine, and literally out of nowhere, just a random storm shows up. So there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing I suppose that I do kind of understand as well is the post challenge and the post event lull.
Yeah.
You experience that, like when you finish the whole thing and you have a bit of like, people like erupted when this happened for you, like, and you kind of like, like I think certainly from the way I saw it, it was like Jesus, Ellie just like not only did all the mountains but also like broke the record, and people erupted for you, and it was amazing. And that you probably had a couple of weeks of that. Like, did that kind of keep the buzz going, or what was that like?
Yeah, it was true. So I've had the post trail blues on several projects. So, and each time I feel like I am more prepared.
Okay.
But each time it does hit. I think it's just something to be expected. So I was putting out daily videos for this project. However, they were on a delay. They weren't live. So I had a couple of days between finishing the project and when the actual last video went out, being like, okay, I've actually done it. Like many people guessed beforehand, but
well, I saw your Strava, so I knew.
Yeah, exactly. So for those couple of days, I was like, you know what? I feel very content. I feel very happy. And I was like, okay, maybe it's not going to hit so hard this time. And then I had, a few days of like being, yay, you did it. But no, it did hit. But the only way to kind of manage it is by going back outside in smaller ways. Now, my car literally broke down on the drive home from Kerry the day after we finished the project. Like that car has actually fully died now. The poor thing limped its way around the country. It was not fit for the lifestyle I wanted to put it through. Let's just say that. And it was quite old. So it breaking down just as made home was both nice to then have a couple of days to be like, well, I can't go anywhere. I haven't slept in my bed in months. I'm going to enjoy that. But I think still going out and doing small things is what really kind of balances those post trail blues for me. Yeah, going swimming in the lake and doing trails around me that are still fun to do and still feel like I'm touching grass and all that.
Yeah, grounding yourself.
Yes, exactly.
And you did the Dublin Marathon recently as well.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that was really fun. That is the first marathon where I've gone out with a friend and been like, we're just going to talk our way the whole way around the marathon. We're going to stay in like zone 2 style. We're just going to talk our way the whole way around. And we did exactly that. And it was fantastic. And I also, I did like the Eco Trail 32K route. I had a lot of fun doing that. I had so much fun. That was
another, like, I'm sure you were like well prepared for that, because that was a torrential day.
At this point, I'm starting to wonder if it's me, because the Dublin Marathon was also raining.
Yes, it was. Yeah, torrential rain.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're bad luck. Right.
Yeah, so maybe I just need to sign up for like the Marathon des Sables style event, and I'll just bring the cool air, the Irish rain with me. And who knows?
So what is next? Like, do you, I know we spoke off record about some plans, but is there anything you can share?
Should have thought about this question.
Yes. It's a tough one though as well, especially when you've like done so many things. You're kind of like, and it's the end of the year as well. Like, we're in November, you know, you're like, well, I'm kind of going to hibernation mode, so maybe.
When I finished, that was the first time where I think that was also what actually maybe fed into my post-trail blues a little bit. That was something I hadn't prepared for. It was the first time I'd finished a big project and didn't have an inkling of what I wanted to do next. So it's taken the couple of months since I finished to have some ideas start knocking about, and nothing has really taken shape yet, but there are loads of ideas there. Yeah, and as I said to you, like one or two that I might like try starting and see how I go, but it's nice to now have some personal ideas, and then come up with some kind of tough souls outdoor adventure-y ones as well.
Nice. Because something I suppose I think about quite a lot is like, there's motivations for things, but once you start doing stuff like this, you just want to keep going, and you want like I think a question that I do ask a lot is like, where do you get the motivation for this? And it's like, well, I get the motivation from the last thing I did, and I got the motivation from the last thing I did before that. And like, you know, the first one was like, I just got up and I just started doing this thing. I watched a movie or read a book, or a friend invited me on this run or something like that, and it just started. Yeah. And I think, you know, like, you have done so many things over the years that like each have been an inspiration for the next thing, because you're just sitting at home kind of going, what wild thing can I do next?
And it was funny, kind of on the last like couple of days where I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to break this record. I was kind of imagining like what questions I might be asked. That sounds very vain, but you're up in the mountains for several hours by yourself. You got to think about something. And
this is great. You're pitching the questions that I should have been asking you through this.
But so the one question I didn't think to ask myself was, why did you do this project? And it was the first question I was asked in an article interview, and I kind of sat there and I was like, but why not? Yeah. And I didn't quite articulate it at the time, but yeah, it's like this thing of I love the outdoors, I love the mountains so much that when the opportunity came, when the stars aligned that I could do this, there was never going to be a chance that I wouldn't. I'm very lucky that I have the kind of the privilege and the access to do this, and that luck is kind of two-sided. It's who I am, and then it's also like I did put in a lot of work to do it, so it's not just leprechaun luck, it's also the luck you build for yourself. But yeah, it was funny how much that stumped me. I was like, I couldn't imagine why I wouldn't want to be on mountains every day, and why the record was a really nice goal, but it wasn't the motivation for the project. And if it had been the motivation, it would have been way more detrimental. The motivation was to climb every mountain and was to continue my love of the mountains. If the motivation is just the record, then why bother picking this record? Why not pick some other record?
Mhm.
What I wanted was to see every mountain, and I did. So
Exactly. You're kind of going through like an Argos catalog of the things that you could be doing, and you're kind of like, oh, I'd like that one. That's something that I can see myself enjoying. Sometimes not enjoying,
yeah,
but most of the time enjoying. That's something that like can see myself dreaming about.
yes,
That's the one I want to do. And if I break the record, fantastic. If I don't, still I got to spend 55 days, 5 hours and 45 minutes on the mountains.
yeah. And in those really low moments, like there were times where I was like, well, but you're doing the thing. Like you're on, like, yeah, it's hard, but you're on the mountains and you're doing the thing. So even though this is quote unquote a low moment and I'm down, I'm still on a form of a high. I'm still, living the life that I dreamed about. So yeah,
I do think that like that answer of why not is just kind of sums it up so well. Another guest that I had, it was on the podcast that came out last week, Louis Philippe Blanc. He's like this expeditionist, and like he pretty much said the same thing. Like I was asking him, why did you cross Tasmania in the wilderness in winter? Unsupported and like avoid roads. Like why did you do that? He was like, what? Like why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
I got inspired by this other person that was doing things, and no one had ever done this before. So I was like, why wouldn't I do it?
Yeah.
If I have the luck to be able to do it, I have the means and I have the drive and I put the work in to do something like this. Why wouldn't I do it? It's not some of these things aren't for the good of mankind or humankind, but not everything has to be about like saving the world, exactly. But there is, at the same time, there is that message that comes along with it, and that's something that you preach so well with Leave No Trace.
Yes.
And I'm sure that took a huge kind of place within the logistics and the planning of everything. When you're thinking about like the land that you're going over, like the traces that you're leaving, making sure that you're not like you're reducing the impact that you have.
And considering all of the people who maintain the land that I was crossing as well. Because like there are some areas that even trails in Ireland go through, like that will be areas of mountains that are called commonage, but they're not common to the people. They are a common stakeholder group, basically. They are common to a group of people that share the land themselves and that maintain it through this group. And some of these groups can have up to 200 landowners involved in taking care of these mountains. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I will say that I had almost zero bad experiences with landowners. I had zero bad experiences. I met several farmers as I kind of came down into their farmyards to be like, hello, this is the way off the mountain that I was told about. I hope you don't mind me being here. And they were so nice. Like one guy, I came down and he was like, oh God, I didn't see you there. And he's kind of looking around and he was like, are you on your own? Like where's the rest of your group, basically? And I was like, just me. And we had a great chat about, there were sea eagles nesting in the cliffs above his farm.
Wow.
And so I think it was like an MPWS ranger or a conservation ranger anyway, would come out every 6 months or so and would go up and do like monitoring and stuff, and then come down and tell him that the chicks that hatched 2 years ago are now, like, this is a guy in Kerry, but the chicks are now living up in Mayo, and he'd hear about that. And we had like the most amazing chat. And then he basically was inviting me in for a cup of tea. And I was like, I actually have to go. I didn't tell him that I had more mountains that I planned on climbing that evening, because he was already looking at me like I was a little bit of a crazy person. I didn't need to kind of open up an extra can of worms. But I had such wonderful conversations with people. And so it's about kind of like respecting all their work as well that I really appreciate.
Yeah. Well, look, again, there's that point again. It's about the people. It's about the experiences that you share with other people. And while you were on your own, you had people around you. You had Carl. You had all your friends. You had everyone kind of watching your Strava, your social media. These things. The best adventures are shared. And This is definitely one. One other question, like I just looked at the time there, and like I could definitely sit here for another hour and chat away. I suppose it's around like the record now. Like, so you hold this record, and like it's one of those ones that I'm sure someone, like, now that it's made the news, and like it's been like your name and your face are plastered all over the world with this. But it invites other people now to come and do it.
Yeah.
And I suppose, how does that make you feel about like the prospect of someone now coming along and taking it away from you?
Excited.
Yeah.
So like I took one day off, I think it was day 42, to go to my friend's wedding. I had promised I'd go to his wedding a year beforehand, and it was a 3-day wedding, and my original plans was that I was going to be finished in time, but as always, the plans change. So I took one day off to drive up to, I was already basically in Kerry, not quite. I drove up to Kildare to go to his wedding for that one day, and we drove back down. So for anybody who wants to beat the record, don't go to a wedding. Don't twist your ankle, because so doing the kind of Dublin Wicklow section took me about 7 days to do the mountains there. And that was because I had maybe like, so I twisted my ankle on day 21. So day 22 through to 25, I was only doing 1 or 2 peaks a day, just to kind of keep the momentum up. But I could just about put the foot in the shoe. So I had to get the swelling down. I had to kind of manage all that, do enough that I felt like I was still making progress, but also resting it. And then don't do it in one of the wettest months of the year. Or wettest months in history, and also the year. That also added time. So one of the hardest mountains I climbed was Bureen Cara in Kerry, and the route up, distance wise, is only about 1,600 meters. You climb close to 700 meters, and it took me 4 hours round trip, because it's just a mountain of rock, and so the mountain was just a waterfall, and I was sliding my way down with every 1 foot I'd go up. And then to come back down it, I had to try and not slide down too fast.
Yeah.
So those are my top tips for anyone who wants to break the record. And yeah, I'd absolutely love for someone else to go and do it. Yeah, let me know when you're planning, and I'll come out and I'll crew for you for whatever amount of days I can.
Because I recently watched, because just say as well, you're not a first time FKT holder. You're second time, at least as far as I know, anyway.
Yeah.
And as you kind of set the record, and you invited people to come along then and take it, but you always had the first. You'd always have the first on that one.
Yeah.
I recently watched, I don't know if you know Paddy O'Leary, the Irish trail runner based in San Francisco.
Yes.
He has a documentary about the Wicklow Round.
I do know this.
And I think it was literally like the day or 2 days after he had set the record, someone came along and beat it.
Yeah.
By like half an hour or something like that.
Yeah. Like breaking a record that soon would have been, I'd say, hard. Like that would be heartbreaking a little bit. It's been a couple months now. And no one's going to do it through the winter, so I have until next summer to enjoy my title. Yeah, that must have been really hard. Or even, what was it, 3 years ago? The top 3 finishers of the Kerry Ultra of the 200k, all top 3 broke the previous record.
Yeah. That's because of the it was a wonder year for conditions. Like they got it, and then the field was just so strong as well.
Yeah.
You just had like Keith Lane and those lads. Like they just when you have people that fast and the conditions are that good, it's always going to be record breaking. Yeah. Ellie, thank you so much for coming on again and waxing lyrical about this. As I said, I could chat for another hour at least about all things mountains and trails and running. I never get to talk much about running on this podcast, so I'm glad to have my day.
Delighted to squeeze it in there.
But I'm sure we're going to be talking again on the podcast at some point in the near future. Whatever you do in the next couple of years, best of luck, and I'm sure we'll be out in the mountain again together soon.
Definitely.
All right, thanks, Ellie.
Cool.
A huge thanks again to Ellie for joining me on the podcast. Always a joy to speak to Ellie. She's just done so many wild and wonderful things, and speaking to her before and after the podcast, she's definitely got her eyes on some big challenges over the next couple of years. That's it for this week. Join us again next week for another conversation, and until then, happy trails.